Hello, Archie Dunlop here with Talking Astrology with Archie on Thursday, January the 8th, 2026. Today there is an exact conjunction between Venus and Mars. And of course, it's part of a wider conjunction involving the Sun as well in the middle of Capricorn. And so, Venus-Mars conjunctions, they're always important in astrology. I do talk about them quite a lot. So in this video, I do want to spend some time considering, what Venus-Mars conjunctions mean. But before I look at Venus and Mars in detail, I want to consider the astrology and the I Ching for today. So here is the chart for today, set for noon New York time on January the 8th. So as far as this chart is concerned, Moon is still in Virgo at noon New York time. The Moon is at 26 degrees of the sign. So it's kind of more of the same. We've got a load of planets in Earth signs again, 4 planets in Capricorn, and the moon in Virgo. So all of the personal planets are in Earth signs, and we've got Uranus in Taurus. So maybe it's a day which is down to earth, perhaps, if we look at things literally. It's also a day when there are no planets in fire signs and only one planet in an air sign, and that planet is Pluto, which is generational. So it's another negative day. Negative because fire and air are the positive elements, and there's only Pluto in a positive element. And so for many of us today might be about reflecting. There's nothing that we want to put out. Okay, that's an exaggeration, but it might be just more difficult to put something new out, and instead it's just about soaking up the vibes and noticing what is going on, and perhaps taking notes. At least that is one view. We can't avoid the fact that there is this conjunction between Sun, Venus, Mars. It's quite a fiery conjunction, even though there's no fire in the chart, and it's in Capricorn. Okay, it's not as fiery as it would be if it were to be in Aries, but Sun and Mars are quite fiery planets, and they want action. But again, it's not the kind of action you'd associate with Aries. Maybe it's slower, perhaps more result orientated, because it's in Capricorn. And maybe the thoroughness of the thing is further emphasized by the fact that the moon is in Virgo. So the moon, while it's in Virgo, it makes a load of trines. It makes trines to Sun, Venus, and Mars. Okay, if you're in the Americas, those trines are going to be strongest right at the beginning of the day. But still, there's a trine relationship between the signs Virgo and Capricorn. So with Moon trine Sun, Venus, and Mars, that might indicate that we can take action. But remember what I said about it being quite a reflective day. Maybe it's not okay. Maybe it's not about us taking action. It's maybe about things just happening. It's a trine aspect. It's so easy for one thing to move into another. And the moon's last aspect, its last couple of aspects before leaving the sign, is makes a trine to Uranus, and then it makes an opposition to Neptune. I think that trine to Uranus is probably more important than the opposition to Neptune. It's more tangible, and I might get myself into trouble here, but as far as I'm concerned, Uranus as a planet works better for Neptune. It's more maybe more reliable for Neptune. Well, of course, anything's more reliable for Neptune, isn't it? But I think one can probably interpret a chart without Neptune. I'm not sure if one could really interpret a chart without Uranus, of course, unless you're using Vedic astrology. So those sort of Earth planets picked up by the moon. So in a way, we've got a bit of a grand trine going on there. So the moon makes the trine to Moon in Virgo makes a trine to the Sun, Venus, and Mars, and then it moves on, makes a trine to Uranus. So it just could be, but certain things are happening, and there's not much to stop them. One thing moves into another. And as far as, when the moon moves into Libra, well, it moves into Libra at 6 minutes past midnight on Friday, London time. So that means if you are in the United States, for example, then, late afternoon, early evening, the moon will move into Libra. So, there could be, a bit of a change there, just after the moon makes the opposition to Neptune. So I said that there aren't any planets in air signs. Well, the moon is coming to the rescue, and in the United States and the Americas, by this evening, the moon will be in Libra, so we get some positivity there, and I think for some of us, that could be a great relief. So that's a picture. If we set the chart for New York. If you're in Australia or New Zealand, of course, the moon is absolutely for sure not going to go into Libra today. And here is the chart for today, set for Sydney at noon. Moon is at 17 degrees Virgo. It is making an exact trine to Sun, Venus, and Mars at midday. So if you are in Australia or New Zealand, you may really feel those trines involving the moon, and on one hand, and the Sun, Venus, and Mars on the other hand. It's going to be very clear. Yeah, maybe for you there is going to be action, and perhaps with Moon in Virgo, you make the preparations, you do what is necessary, and then you see the results. So if you're looking for something to happen, maybe you can engineer things correctly, but don't be too impulsive. I just don't think that today is really a day when impulsiveness is going to work. Wherever you are. And then there is the heliocentric view, putting the sun at the center of the solar system, and just a reminder that the opposition involving the Earth and Jupiter on one hand and Venus and Mars on the other is really hitting maximum power at the moment. Earth is getting close to Jupiter, the conjunction of Jupiter. Earth is getting moving towards the opposition of Mars, and maybe things really are hotting up. I was just looking at the news, and the Venezuelans have seized an oil tanker. It was under a Russian flag. Is that going to lead to war? No, but there's just scope here for something happening. I'm not saying it is going to happen, but this Earth-Jupiter conjunction needs to be taken very seriously. I mean, not every Earth-Jupiter conjunction needs to be taken seriously. You have to look at what else is going on. But the fact that the Earth-Jupiter conjunction is taking place at the same time as the Venus-Mars conjunction, and they are opposition one another. Okay, you could say you don't really need a heliocentric chart to see this, because we know that that Sun, Venus, and Jupiter are Sun, Venus, and Mars geocentrically are heading towards an opposition to Jupiter. But is that right? Hold on, let me get this right. Yeah, but the fact that heliocentrically, we put Earth in this position. I just think it's nice to see the Earth like this. This is our planet. We can see what's going on with our planet. So you imagine the solar system. The sun in the middle of the solar system. There is Earth and Jupiter on one side, and then you've got Venus and Mars on the other side. So we're miles. We are really miles away from Venus and Mars at the moment. We think about Venus and Mars as being two planets which are relatively close to the Earth, but at the moment they are a long way because they're on the other side of the sun. And yeah, we can perhaps feel that tension. And I think I'll be talking tomorrow, Friday, about the Earth-Jupiter conjunction. I think that is a really quite an important event, in my opinion. So now let me turn to the 12 signs. So these are my forecasts for the 12 signs for today, which is Thursday, January the 8th, 2025. Aries, sorry, let me repeat that. It is Thursday. These are my forecasts for the 12 signs for Thursday, January the 8th, 2026. Okay. Aries. Venus is conjunct Mars. It's exact today. So the question is, what does that mean for Venus to be right on your ruler? And you could say that that's a pretty good thing. I mean, Mars is strong. Mars is in Capricorn. It's exalted in Capricorn. Venus is a benefic. And so you very much benefit from Venus. And that isn't just about relationships. Venus is a planet of good luck. So you might find with this conjunction that things actually work quite well for you. That you are able to get things done, and if you try your hardest, then things might just naturally come together. And I think it is important to try your hardest, because at the moment the moon is in Virgo, and the moon, it's making a trine to Mars, but moon in Virgo, being an Aries, you're perhaps slightly uncomfortable with that, and Virgo does call for structure, making sure that everything is in good order. You can't necessarily rely on chance or assume everything is going to work your way. It needn't. What do they like to say at the moment? They talk about sort of main character syndrome. Now, that's a really common phrase, main character syndrome. I think particularly sort of younger people like to use it. It refers to games, of course. You are the main character, so because you're the main character, things tend to work your way, and you can get away with things that you wouldn't get away if you were just a non-player character, just someone who is just an extra. And so you perhaps mustn't assume that you are a main character in terms of looking at luck and whether or not things are going to work. Things aren't just going to work all by themselves. On the other hand, I think that with the moon making a trine to Mars, I think that things can move relatively quickly. But it just is so important that you put in the work, because if you do leave things to chance, I'm not convinced that much is going to happen. We can't deny the fact that Mars is in a very prominent place in your chart. Mars is in a place that's it's often associated with work and getting ahead and making progress, and it's certainly supported by the moon in Virgo. So if you have ambitions and you want to get yourself together, you want to really get to grips with 2026, then Aries, I think that you very much can, but you don't want to take it too far. You don't want to get angry about it. And you shouldn't forget that the Sun is starting to make a conjunction to Mars. I think the Sun-Mars conjunction is exact tomorrow. And this Sun-Mars conjunction is potentially dangerous. And it might just encourage you to take something too far and get yourself into trouble. So if you take risks, if you take on too much, the results may be quite negative. There is, of course, a plus side to the Sun conjunct Mars. It does give you a lot of energy. It can be energizing, but you have to remember what I said at in the introduction to this video. This at the moment, we've got a load of planets in water signs and earth signs. We don't have any planets in fire signs. So that means that you can't be the initiator all the time. If you try too hard to initiate, you might just find that the world around you just is not responsive. And so you mustn't assume that other people are going to respond to you. And it may just be, down to you to sort of make things happen, slowly but surely. And yeah, so you can get it together. But it's just important that you adopt the right approach and you are sort of quite systematic about it. And finally, there's relationships. Well, I have to say something about relationships with Venus-Mars conjunction. Venus could easily represent another person, and you might say that with a Venus-Mars conjunction, you and another person could get close to one another. And that might be a good thing. But on the other hand, look at it from Venus's point of view. Mars is potentially a malefic. And so in the wrong circumstances, you might have an unfortunate impact on another person. I mean, you've got to think about things both ways. So really think about relationships and what you're doing and how you're coming across, and there just could be something about you that isn't pleasant. I mean, I know I'm supposed to say you are pleasant, that everyone loves you and all that kind of stuff. But in certain situations, you might give off the wrong vibes, and you might think you're attracting someone, but it might be the opposite. Particularly if you don't give the matter some thought. And so Aries, relationships, there's certainly a possibility here, of you and someone else having a lot to do with one another, but that is not necessarily positive. And so whatever you're doing, do think about things from the other person's point of view. Now, that's probably going to be easier if you're in the Americas, because this evening the moon will move into Libra, and of course Libra is your opposite sign, and so with the moon moving into Libra, then you're going to find it just easier to understand other people, and also perhaps understand how to behave. And you'll know that you can't just look at things on the surface. You have to be a little more sensitive than that. And if you're not in the Americas, well, the Venus-Mars conjunction will still be around tomorrow, and which is Friday, and also on Friday, of course, the moon will be in Libra for everyone. Taurus. The day is dominated by this conjunction between Venus and Mars. And of course, Venus is your ruler. And the question is, this aspect, is it a good thing? I mean, Mars can be a problem planet. It can be about, irritations. Who are the people in your life who might be irritating if you give them the chance? And so, don't just hang out with anyone. Some people can really help you. They can work in your favor, but not everyone. And so I think a bit of discernment is going to be important, and you should perhaps think about how people have behaved in the past, and also how much power you're prepared to give away, because Venus conjunct Mars. Mars is a planet with the power. Mars is quite a dominant planet. It's also in Capricorn, it's exalted in Capricorn. Venus doesn't have that kind of strength at the moment. And so in terms of any relationship you're in, however brief, whatever it's for, any kind of contact you have with another person, really try to consider the power dynamic, because in many cases the power dynamic may not be running in your favor, and you might find that your position is relatively weak. And is that what you want? So you might argue with this Venus-Mars conjunction that relationships should actually be avoided, because you could come up against someone who just holds all the cards. Now, the Venus-Mars conjunction isn't necessarily about another person, and so the question is, what is that Mars about? And Mars can be about a principle that you're trying to make your own. So you could argue that if Venus is conjunct Mars, then that allows you to be more assertive. You can push forward with your agenda. I think you're going to have to make an effort here. It's not going to necessarily come naturally to you. But if you want to own Mars, perhaps you can. I mean, on balance, I would probably say that it's going to be easier to own Mars if you're male rather than female. I mean, that's obvious, isn't it? Because Mars is a male planet. In a female chart, Mars is quite likely to be projected. But if you really want to own Mars, regardless of your gender, I think you can. And perhaps the key to owning Mars is to not be to be limited, to tell yourself that you really want to take things further, that you want to move on, that you want to do something that is interesting and exciting. When you're doing that, when you're covering new ground, perhaps on your own initiative, then it's going to be easiest to take full control of Mars and to be Mars yourself. Now, you could argue that I'm contradicting myself here, because I did say at the beginning of this video that there are no planets in fire signs or air signs, so it's going to be difficult for anyone to take the initiative. But that was perhaps a generalization. And you, Taurus, you're an earth sign. You understand the earth signs. We've got 5 planets in Capricorn. We've got one planet in Virgo. That's the moon. And so you're comfortable with all this energy. And there is a grand trine potentially in earth signs, because we've got moon in Virgo trining Sun, Venus, Mars, and also the moon makes a trine to Uranus. So I think, Taurus, of all the 12 signs, you're the one that can really make things happen. But you have got to believe in yourself, and it's important that you don't give another person too much power. It's got to be you who's in control in the end. I mean, that doesn't mean to say you don't take into account other people's opinions, but if you were to give someone free rein, if you were to allow another person to make the final choices, I don't think that would be such a good thing, and I think that you might find that Mars becomes a problem. So that goes back to what I was saying. I think that ownership of Mars and ownership of the power and energy and dynamism of Mars would be a good thing for Taurians. Gemini. It's a day when perhaps things are moving, but you're watching them move. I'm not convinced you're right in the middle of things. So you can see how things are working, how one thing leads to another quite quickly. But the question is, Gemini, are you in full control? I think the answer is probably not. You're just watching. You are watching things unfold, and perhaps one reason for this passivity, is the fact that there are, no planets in fire signs. There's only Pluto in an air sign, at least until this evening or late afternoon if you're in the Americas. So, by all means, get excited about what is going on. Look at everything with interest, but I would suggest that you don't get directly involved. Instead, use your powers of analysis to understand what is happening, and that is the right thing to do. Mercury, your ruler, is making a sextile to the North Node. I mean, Mercury sextile North Node is kind of giving you some advice here about what is the best way for dealing with the day's energies. And the North Node, it's in Pisces, and it's in a quite a high profile sector of your chart. Now, that means that you certainly should take an interest in the future, take an interest in how you're going to move from one step to the next. But just because you take an interest doesn't mean that you're right there in the thick of things. So it seems to me, Gemini, that you can certainly take active steps to, increase your prospects of success, but you have to do it in the right way. If you are in the middle of things, if you are taking the initiative, or at least trying to take the initiative, then I'm just not convinced it's going to work. And there might be a lot of misfiring, and you just might have an overall sense of just being dissatisfied. So, Gemini, work on what you have. You have a base from which you're working, and you stay within that. You don't go beyond your knowledge and your ability. You take what you see, you think about it, you analyze it, you perhaps think about the future, but I really don't think that you need to draw too much attention to yourself. Just be where you feel most comfortable. Now, there is a change late in the day if you are in the Americas, because at 6 minutes past 7 in the evening, New York time, the moon moves into Libra. And that's going to be 4 minutes past 6. Sorry, that's going to be 6 minutes past 4 in the afternoon if you're in California. So if you are in the United States, or other parts of the Americas, late afternoon or early evening, the moon will change sign. The moon will move into Libra, and when the moon moves into Libra, it will straight away start making a trine to Pluto. So by the end of the day, if you're awake, I don't know what your plans are for the last part of the day, you may actually feel sort of more active and better able to interact with what's going on. And some of the passivity of the day will go as well. You can start to think about, what do you actually want to initiate, and perhaps you are able to start initiating things on the basis of things that you've been working out over the last couple of days. And and tomorrow, Friday, wherever you are, the moon will be in Libra, and so I think there is going to be a change for you, Gemini, and I think that things are going to become more positive, and I mean positive in a quite literal way, positivity, as in as opposed to the negativity, all those planets in Earth and water signs, but there is that positivity of the moon moving into an air sign and making a trine to Pluto. Cancer. The moon is doing quite a lot of things today. The moon is active, and from a Cancerian point of view, that is important. I mean, the moon, of course, is your ruler, and there's always this problem with doing the Cancerian horoscope. Arguably Cancer is most difficult of all the 12 signs to do a reading for, and the reason for that is that the moon, your ruler, is so fast. It's you've got this problem. When I'm doing my 12 sign forecasts, I'm trying to be global, but different countries, different time zones are going to have a moon in different signs. So that at the same time on the same day, and so that does make things difficult, and things are too fast. And it's with you when you're dealing with lunar aspects, they only take place just for a few hours, and then it moves on. So with Cancer, one has to kind of think about the general sweep of the moon, and as far as the general sweep of the moon is, well, by and large it's in Virgo, and by and large it's making trine aspects to Sun, Venus and Mars, and by and large those aspects, I would have said, are pretty fortunate. And Moon in Virgo, that's a great sign for the moon to be in, particularly by night, because the moon rules the earth signs by night, and making the trine to Sun, Venus, and Mars, it is energizing, and you can be energized on a day when a lot of people don't have much energy. So, of the 12 signs, you are one of the signs that can be most dynamic. And the reason you can be most dynamic is because you're fundamentally dealing with things which are familiar. And if you're familiar with something, it's easier to respond, it's easier to react. And then we have a grand trine potentially, because the moon, having made the trine to Sun, Venus, and Mars, it moves on, starts moving to a trine of Uranus. So all of the earth signs are activated. And so Cancer, if you want things to happen, I very much think that they can happen. You can make them happen. Now, not everyone is in that position. I said at the beginning that overall today is quite passive, but for you, Cancer, I think you do have the ability to take the initiative in areas that are right for you. You don't have to take the initiative left, right, and centre. There just be maybe a few things that you want to deal with. You feel that you have got something to say, and it's just going to be very easy because of that trine. Indeed, because of that grand trine. So don't make things difficult. Things don't have to be difficult today. They can just naturally run from one thing to another. So overall, Cancer, I'm pretty optimistic. Now, though, if you are in the Americas, then this afternoon, or this evening for most of you in the Americas, the moon does change sign. The moon moves out of Virgo and moves into Libra. And some people might be speeding up as the moon moves into Libra, but I think you, Cancer, will respond to the moon moving into Libra by slowing down. There have been a lot of things going on, but it can't go on forever. And so when the moon goes into Libra, you might just want to relax and get your house in order. Perhaps there are certain things that have got slightly out of control. You've had too many thoughts. And it's a good opportunity to ground yourself. Of course, if you're not in the Americas, then the moon won't move into Libra until tomorrow. Leo. There is a trine between the moon and the sun today. I think sun-moon trines are pretty fortunate. And this trine, we shouldn't really be thinking necessarily about the exact aspect. The point is, the moon is in late Virgo, the sun is in sort of mid to late Capricorn. So there's just a natural trine relationship between the sun and the moon. Now, as far as how you respond to it, it's not like it's a call for action. I don't think it's a particularly action-orientated day. Instead, Leo, it's just about you being able to relax and also just to get some kind of perspective on things. You can look at how everything is unfolding. You can perhaps integrate things, one step at a time. So you might have a way of looking at things. This view may not be perfect, and you want to understand what's happening in the world. You understand one thing, you make it part of your daily routine, then you understand something else and you bring that into your daily routine. And so that might actually be how this moon trine sun is working. And it's not just the fact that the moon is making a trine to the sun. I mean, the moon is making trines to Sun, Venus, Mars, and indeed Uranus. So, with this grand trine, it's perhaps it is about good organization, not panicking, not exaggerating, not thinking that any one thing is so important that you have to drop everything for it. You just take it slowly, and in that way, things really do start to work for you, and they start to move. But it's all very unspectacular, and perhaps that is the way it should be. Now, there may be moments today when you feel that you have to say something, and the question is, do you need to say anything? I mean, by and large, the answer might be no. But if something needs to be said, I think you can say it, with a considerable amount of power. And if something isn't right, and you feel that everyone needs to know about it, then you can give everyone a piece of your mind. You need to do it in a way that is very fast and precise, and you stick to the facts, and you don't say too much. But I think that is something you can do. And also with these trines, indeed the whole grand trine complex, it can be about you being able to make real progress. Yeah, not necessarily in a spectacular way, but you have an idea about what you'd like to be doing, where you'd like to be going, and you kind of naturally know what needs to be done. And so by just making sure that everything is sorted out, making sure that you are always looking after your own vital interests, you don't have to shout about it. You just have to know what is important to you right now, and sort of you do that, and you're just quite sort of solid and responsible about it. Then I think that today can exceed your expectations, if in a rather unexciting way. Virgo. Moon is still moving through Virgo, coming to the end of Virgo. In fact, if you're in the Americas, then late afternoon, early evening, the moon does leave Virgo and it moves into Libra. But I don't want to worry too much about that Libra change today in this forecast. I really want to focus on the moon in Virgo. What is the moon doing in Virgo? The moon is making trines. It's making trine aspects to Sun, Venus, and Mars. It's also making a trine to Uranus. That means that we have a grand trine today, grand trine in Earth signs. So if you are a Virgo, then I think that you probably very much will appreciate this grand trine in Earth signs. It means that things can happen, and they can happen quite quickly and quite easily. And they won't necessarily announce themselves. There won't be fireworks, but it is all moving your way, slowly but surely, and you don't have to doubt yourself. You don't have to push things. I mean, you might feel you would like to push things, but you don't. And also, Virgo, it's very important that you stick to what you have. You stick to what is in front of you. You do not want to be speculative. Now, you could be speculative. That is possible. I know that doesn't sound very Virgoan, but you just might have some passing fantasies about what is possible. And probably they should remain as fantasies. And additionally, there could be some wishful thinking. Believing that something is possible, believing that other people are going to do things your way, that everything's going to be fine without your intervention. Well, it's not a day for fantasies. Well, unless you're an artist or you're writing about fantasy material, or you're using your imagination, but you have to split that off. For most Virgoans, in terms of the daily structure, what you are doing, what is important, you need to stick to what is real. In other words, you need to stick to being a Virgo. Don't go beyond your own sign, and and that really doesn't limit you at all. At the moment, with all those planets in Capricorn, this is really very creative. And, when I say creative, I don't mean that in a wishy-washy way. I'm just talking about, what you can do, what you do well, and, what is a a fundamental part of, who you are. And it's quite easy to demonstrate this, to show this, and perhaps in the process to be surprising, but in a rather downstated way. Okay, you might surprise yourself, you might surprise a couple of other people, but it's not fireworks. It's not something. It's not a huge effect. It's not explosive. It doesn't register, on the seismograph on the other side of the world. It doesn't. But just because it doesn't register on the seismograph, it doesn't mean to say that nothing is going on. So I think Virgo, that things are moving, and they move quite easily. Additionally, Mercury is making a sextile to the North Node, making a sextile to the nodal axis. And so I think that the sextile to the nodal axis is something that is fortunate, or sextile trine to the nodal axis. So Mercury is sextile the North Node, it's trine the South Node. And so with that sextile, you have the possibility of being able to do something which is really very much in accord with who you are, and you shouldn't necessarily think that you have to do it on your own. And so it's possible that you might find that you and perhaps another person have a shared interest, something you've got in common, and if you can work together on something, it can be very effective, more effective than if you do it on your own. And indeed, short term, that might be your destiny, to work with another person on some particular project. Okay, this project might just be something that lasts for a day. It needn't be anything long term, but always consider how other people can have an impact, and how it can be better and more constructive, and more in accord with your destiny, to do something that is shared rather than do everything as some kind of solo effort. Libra. Venus is making a conjunction to Mars. I mean, we can't do anything about that, and there is this question about whether the Venus conjunct Mars is a good aspect. In astrology, we shouldn't really be thinking about good and bad aspects. It is perhaps somewhat primitive, and we have to sort of look at things in a more sort of nuanced way. But I can certainly see how the Venus-Mars conjunction could be a problem, because you have to think about that Venus-Mars conjunction in two ways. You can think about Mars being conjuncted by Venus, but you can also say, well, Venus is being conjuncted by Mars. And of course, Venus is your ruler, and Mars can be a difficult influence. It is a malefic, and it represents something that is stronger than you. I mean, short term, because Mars is in Capricorn, and it might be this rather unfair situation, certainly as far as other people are concerned, that someone is benefiting from you and you are not benefiting from them. Now, that might be fine. You do someone a favor, it happens, and they benefit from you doing them a favor. That's what it's all about. But it could be not so fine. It could be about you being somewhat drained. Maybe even your own good luck is being drained, and someone is getting stronger just because of your presence. And if there aren't sufficient boundaries, then you could find yourself being exhausted by the situation. And that is the way it often is with people. You think that in any relationship that there's a certain give and take, but certain relationships always seem to work in one person's favor, and it's not even obvious. It's almost like it's very subtle. It almost seems quite supernatural just when you hang out with a particular person, your luck might increase or your luck might decrease. And I think that with Venus-Mars, with this Venus-Mars conjunction, it just could be that some people are exhausting and they take what you have. It's not even their fault. It's not like anyone is being deliberately manipulative. It's just about the way the connection works. But Venus is now starting to move away from the conjunction to Mars. I mean, London time, the Venus-Mars conjunction happens at 2:43 a.m. So after 2:43 a.m. London time, which is in fact yesterday, if you're in the Americas, Wednesday if you're in the Americas. So that Venus-Mars conjunction has reached peak strength. And Venus and Mars are still going to be pretty close to one another for the next week or more. But still, today is the peak. So if you do feel that someone is taking too much, whether it's at a conscious or unconscious level, it's not a situation which is going to go on forever. And so that is a way of looking at Venus-Mars. I mean, it's not the only way of looking at it. And another way of looking at it is to say, well, it's just looking at a particular relationship and the closeness of a particular relationship, how much you and another person have in common, and also the Venus-Mars conjunction is going to highlight what the differences are. Because you've got two planets with rather different principles. I mean, Venus is about looking at connections, what makes people the same, or what gives people a similarity between each other. And Mars is always looking at differences. And I think that perhaps the emphasis is going to be on differences from your perspective. And it's good to be aware of those differences. Now, we can look at Venus-Mars in a different way. And we could say that Mars represents a principle which is kind of touching you, which can become part of you. And Mars is, of course, quite a sort of dynamic, high energy principle. And so maybe you can become sort of completely dynamic with this Venus-Mars conjunction. You can actually take it on board. Now, I said something similar to Taurus, because Taurus has Venus as its ruler. You also have Venus as your ruler, and so this just might be a principle that needs to become part of you and part of how you express yourself. And that doesn't mean to say, but right now you have to be super dynamic, certainly during the first part of the day. If you are in the Americas, then late afternoon, early evening, the moon will move into Libra. So that is going to bring a change. And I think that with the moon moving into Libra, I think you are able to be more assertive. And it's always good to have the moon in an air sign, particularly as you've had Pluto as the only planet in air, and because you are an air sign, so having the moon in Libra in a fellow air sign, it's in your air sign, I think is going to allow you to have more agency and to be in more control. But I'll talk about that when I do my reading for tomorrow, Friday. Scorpio. I have really emphasized the Venus-Mars conjunction today. I mean, is there any reason for me to have emphasized it so much? I mean, this Venus-Mars conjunction has been going on for some time, so I could have emphasized it yesterday or the day before. But, today it is exact. In fact, it might be exact. It might have been exact last night if you're in the Americas, because the Venus-Mars conjunction is at 2:43 a.m. London time, which would make that 9:43 p.m. on Wednesday the 7th, New York time. But still, it's close, this Venus-Mars conjunction. And I would regard the Venus-Mars conjunction as being a positive. I mean, your ruler, Mars, is already pretty strong because it's in Capricorn. It's in the sign of its exaltation. But now it gets Venus. It gets a dose of Venus. And Venus is a benefic. When a planet is conjuncted by Venus, it gets plus points. So if you go look at William Lilly's Christian Astrology, he has a table of that's how you evaluate planets, and you look at all sorts of things. You look at its dignity, whether it's exalted or in its own sign, or whether it's retrograde. And there are all sorts of things you can look at. You can look at whether or not it's conjuncted by Jupiter or conjuncted by Venus. And that matters because Jupiter and Venus are the benefics. So if a planet is right next to Venus, it gains strength. So Mars gains strength by its proximity to Venus, and that means you gain strength. So overall, Scorpio, this really does put you in a pretty strong position, and not everyone around you is so placed, and so this perhaps gives you an advantage. You can perhaps take the lead, and in any competitive situation, there's a good chance that you come out the winner. I'm not saying you will come out the winner, but I think you could, because Venus-Mars. Well, Venus might also represent your opponent or someone else, and if you put Venus and Mars together, who's going to win? Well, I think in this case, Mars is probably going to win. So, Scorpio, you can have real confidence in yourself, and you're helped by the fact that the moon in Virgo is making a trine to Mars. It's also making a trine to Venus and a trine to the Sun, and so this just gives you just a natural fluency, and you can be relatively extroverted. Now, today is not a very extroverted day in general because there are so many planets in earth and water signs. It's quite negative, but sort of in a relative sense, from a Scorpio perspective, I think compared to other people, you can certainly be more of an extrovert. You can almost go against some of the fundamental principles, or they're not principles. They're perhaps some of the stereotypical keywords associated with Scorpio. And you can go against that, and you can rather than be hidden, secluded, brooding, all of that. You don't have to be like that. You can instead be out there, perhaps be available, making an impression. And I think that in many cases, people are going to listen to you. And as far as relationships concerned, whatever the relationship is about, you can make it work. But perhaps you have to be slightly careful, because when you think about Venus conjunct Mars, Mars can be overwhelming. There's poor Venus, but you are Mars, and the moon is also picking up with this trine to Venus and Mars. So while you can be overwhelming, you're also a Scorpio. And because you're a Scorpio, you do have a certain amount of sensitivity and perhaps tact. And if you make the effort, you can make sure that you don't go too far. And you can also make use of the fact that Mars is on the Sun-Venus midpoint. You can see it in the chart. And so with Mars on the Sun-Venus midpoint, halfway, right in the middle of Sun and Venus, that just can give you a natural ability to get on with people and even to be reassuring. And the things you say can make a difference, and people notice them, and they may well be prepared to follow your lead. So Scorpio, there is a degree of responsibility today, and I think that responsibility comes from your relative power. It is relative power. It's your power compared with other people, and compared with other people, I do think that you are pretty well placed. Sagittarius, don't doubt yourself, Sagittarius. I think that that is important. Do think about whatever it is that you're trying to do, that you're trying to achieve, you're trying to get off the ground. You might have your doubts. You might think that things maybe are too complicated. That's of course not what we want. You need to be sort of down to earth about it. Consider what you can do and what you can't do. Don't be speculative. Don't try your hand at something you've never done before. It might be exciting, or rather, you might want to create excitement, but it just wouldn't work, I don't think. And so, stick to what you know and trust. And if you can do that, then Sagittarius, I think that things really should work, and you're going to be helped by the fact that there is a grand trine in Earth signs, because you've got the moon in Virgo, and the moon in Virgo is making trines to Sun, Venus, and Sun, Mars, and Venus. It's also making a trine to Uranus, and so Sagittarius, that does give you the ability to make an impact, but in quite a quiet and understated way. You're not looking for drama. That is not your main desire. It shouldn't be your main desire. Instead, you're looking for progress, but also stability, order and stability. I mean, that's what you're looking for, but also progress. And so you can get that, and in the process, part of you may be thinking about the past, what hasn't been done in the past. Maybe things that other people haven't done in the past. You expected it and it didn't happen. And so you're in a position to make it happen. You certainly can. And if you want to, for example, talk about money, talk about what you're owed or what you'd like to earn, I think you can. You don't have to be a Sagittarius about it. It's not like you want to cause shock. I mean, you can cause shock if you want. If you want to catch people unawares and you want to create surprises, but I don't think that's what people can deal with. So you have to understand, other people's sensitivities, but I think you can do it. And so Sagittarius, think about how you want to bring everything together. And a great day for sort of tying up loose ends. And again, it might not be very interesting, but the point is you're making progress. And I think throughout the day, it should perhaps be like 2 steps forward, 1 step back. You make some progress, you get a result, you then pause, you kind of integrate what you've done into who you are. You make sure it's all in order. Then you move to the next stage. And so, it doesn't sound necessarily too good, 2 steps forward, 1 step back. But I do think that is the way to do it. And you do, I think, Sagittarius, know your limits, and perhaps that is your strength. And in a way, if you know your limits, you're never going to exceed yourself, and in a way, by knowing your limits, you can kind of be limitless in what can eventually be achieved. Capricorn. Still a lot of planets in Capricorn. 4 planets: Sun, Mercury, Venus, Mars, and these Capricorn planets are being highlighted, by trines from the moon. So we've got the moon in late Virgo, aspecting these Capricorn planets, and that does mean, Capricorn, that it should be pretty easy to get things moving, to create action, and also to think about what it is that you want, what it is that you aspire to. And you don't have to be satisfied with what is right in front of you. If you want to go further, if you want to be inspirational, then I think you can. And, you can be quite positive about it. Now, by saying quite positive, I'm mindful of the fact that there are no planets in, there's one planet in a positive sign, Pluto in Aquarius, because air signs are positive. But we know we've got a real emphasis here on the Earth signs, and we've also got Jupiter and Saturn in Pisces, and Neptune as well. But it's Jupiter and Saturn that matters. But you're a Capricorn, and so maybe this positive negative thing is working out differently. And I think compared with most other people, and perhaps compared with the positive signs, the positive signs, Aries, Gemini, Leo, Libra, Sagittarius, Aquarius, compared to the positive signs, you might have some advantage because you understand what's going on. You just are able to relate to it. And certainly you're able to make the very most of the Capricorn energy because of that lunar aspect. And so that means that you probably have quite a high level of freedom. You do what you feel is important, but don't necessarily rely too much on other people. While it's true that there is a Venus-Mars conjunction in Capricorn, and this Venus-Mars conjunction certainly makes you charismatic, people pay attention to you, there's something about you that is attractive with a Venus-Mars conjunction in Capricorn. There may be a question about how fast people can move. They may not be able to move as fast as you. They may not have your initiative, and some people just might be slow. You're having an impact. People are listening to you, so you'd assume that if people are paying attention to you, that they're going to act accordingly, and that might not be the case. There is a certain sluggishness around. It's not your sluggishness. Must emphasize that it's other people's sluggishness, and that means, Capricorn, that perhaps you have to be somewhat tolerant. Be aware of other people's weaknesses. Also, be aware of their concerns, because some people are just a little bit afraid of the future, and they'd perhaps rather dwell in the past. I mean, the past is supposedly easier, it's more controllable, we know what's going on, but the future, might seem a bit scary. It's not scary to you. I think you Capricorn, you just understand the ways of the world. You just understand, the way things are moving. Now, the moon, I said it's in Virgo. It's in late Virgo, and it does change sign. It changes sign. Well, if you're in the UK, it changes sign tomorrow at 6 minutes past midnight. But if you're in the Americas, then late afternoon or perhaps early this evening. I think if you're in Chile, that would be 9:06 p.m. So that's not quite early evening, but it's going to get there. It's going to get there in the end today if you're in the Americas. And so, with the moon moving out of Virgo into Libra, I don't know to what extent you're going to be able to feel that. But if you are having a busy evening, if you're going to bed, then that's different. But if you're having a busy evening, if you're awake this evening in the Americas, then you just might notice a change. You might suddenly realize that there are things that are important. Moon when it moves into Libra, it does make a trine to Pluto, and so that might make you think, at the last moment, that something needs to be done. There's something you need to pay attention to. And you might become sort of even more active. So, if you are in the Americas, don't assume that this evening things are just going to necessarily be slower. You might suddenly have a blast of energy. But, if you're not in the Americas, well, tomorrow, Friday, the moon will definitely be in Libra. Aquarius. The day is, dominated by a conjunction between, Venus and Mars. I mean, it has to be. I mean, this Venus-Mars conjunction is exact. Okay, it would be, if you're in the Americas, it would have been exact very late last night. sometime on the evening, sometime on Wednesday evening. But still, I mean, it's pretty close. And this Venus and Mars conjunction might say something about how you come across and how people respond to you, and it can be about charm. And your charm at the moment is real, but somewhat understated. It's not immediately obvious. It's difficult to put a finger on it to say, well, oh, this is what makes you charming. You're like this. No, it's something else, and it's perhaps some magic that you have, and maybe your secret is that you're not revealing too much. You're keeping things to yourself, and it could be that the more you keep things to yourself, the stronger you'll be, and the more people will pay attention to you. So don't feel that you have to do anything, and also don't necessarily make assumptions about other people. They might respond to you in one way just because of you are, but what does that mean? I mean, some people are disappointing. They might be. And so that might be a good reason today why if something is important, Aquarius, you should probably do it on your own. If you're reliant on other people, then it might be disappointing. It might be frustrating. Then there may be moments of frustration. Especially if you're not self-reliant. If you're self-reliant, well, then that's fine. You can just do things in your own way, and if something goes wrong, well, it's down to you, and then you can resolve it, and you'll know that it is completely down to you. Now, late in the day, if you're in the Americas, the moon does change sign, and I think the sign change could be something quite welcome. The moon moves into Libra. Moon moves into an air sign, and there hasn't been any air. It's a bit airless at the moment, except for Pluto. But when the moon moves into Libra, it does make a trine to Pluto. So that Libra movement, well, it happens at 6 minutes past midnight London time on Friday. So if you're in the UK or Europe, then you stay up late, you stay up into Friday, you might notice a change as the moon moves into Libra. Suddenly there is more action, perhaps more action just as you were planning on going to bed or whatever. If you're in the Americas, late afternoon, early evening, the moon makes that change. And so, and Aquarius, I think that is going to be really welcome. You've got that air. Things aren't quite so suffocating. And further, the moon, when it moves into Libra, it makes a trine to Pluto. So American Aquarians may be able to take advantage of that. You might sort of be aware that things aren't so bad, and that you have the ability to make things happen and to be taken seriously, and indeed to utilize Pluto in Aquarius. Don't forget, Pluto is in Aquarius. Pluto is a transformative energy, and so with moon in Libra trining Pluto, that might be that you can start work on some kind of transformation, and you'll start to be aware of possibilities which earlier in the day might not have existed. Now, if you're not in the Americas, don't worry. Moon is going into Libra tomorrow. It's going to be fine, and I think that probably tomorrow is going to be an easier day than today. But we'll talk about that in my video for Friday. Pisces, I hope you're enjoying the negativity. Maybe this is peak negativity. We have 6 planets in Earth signs, and we have got three planets in water signs. So the Earth and water signs are the negative signs, and so you could say, Pisces, that you are very much in your element, and you kind of understand what's going on, and you have a feeling for where things are going in that Piscean way. I mean, if you're a Pisces, you can feel the current. If you can feel other people's weaknesses. You can, well, that's a rather grim thing to say, but you can almost smell the blood in the water. I mean, that is a Piscean thing. And when I say blood in the water, I'm talking about the action. Maybe sort of miles away, maybe tens, hundreds of miles away, and it's just a sign of what is to come. It might also be a sign of opportunity. One shouldn't forget that a shark is a fish. I don't know how much of a shark you are. I mean, some Pisceans are sharks, aren't they? But a shark is not necessarily a negative animal. I mean, you've got to look after yourself, and so you are aware of where the opportunities lie, and at the same time, with the moon moving through Virgo, your opposite sign, that just gives you an understanding of certain other people. You feel, you notice the signals, you notice the body language, and so because of this passivity, I think that you have an opportunity to perhaps take advantage of it. And maybe in certain cases take advantage of other people's weaknesses. But of course, you've got to think about the moral side of things. And there are lots of aspects involving the moon. Moon is making a trine to Sun, trine to Venus, trine to Mars. It's also making a sextile to Jupiter. And that sextile to Jupiter, I would have regarded as being pretty fortunate. And that moon sextile Jupiter, perhaps particularly strong in Australasia or maybe Europe later in the day, maybe not so much in the Americas. But that moon sextile Jupiter does allow you to find some way of cooperating with other people, or certainly benefiting from other people. Sextile is it's a good aspect. It's an aspect which has a certain dynamism to it. It sort of combines ease and dynamism, and so you can work constructively with others. And part of your secret is just being able to understand what makes other people tick. And because you are able to because you know what makes other people tick, it just makes things so much easier. And additionally, we've got Venus-Mars conjunction, and this Venus-Mars conjunction, I think, is fortunate for you. When it comes to Venus and Mars, the question is, which planet represents you, if any, Venus and Mars. I mean, Venus is, of course, exalted in Pisces, but Mars rules the water signs. So in a way, both Venus and Mars are planets which you're comfortable with. And so when you put Venus and Mars together, it just may say something about how you're able to present yourself. If you're with other people, if you're in a group, it doesn't matter how many people are around you. You can handle it. And I think that Venus and Mars means that you can get attention, you can get noticed. And I think you can get noticed in all the right ways. So that's the 12 signs. And now I want to look at the I Ching. So I asked the question, what is Thursday going to be like for those watching the I Ching section of this video? And the first hexagram I got was hexagram number 24, which is return. So we get this idea of return by looking at that bottom line. The bottom line is unbroken. Something new is coming in, but it is return. So with return, we perhaps get the idea of we are moving in a particular direction. We've been discovering things. We've been working things out. And now it's a point of return. It's a time to reconsider. Perhaps we've just gone far enough. And, with 3 moving lines in this. 3 moving lines is quite a lot. And with 3 moving lines, that might indicate there is a lot going on today. And this process of return has perhaps, at different stages. And, the bottom line moves. And, with the bottom line moving, that might indicate that, we've tried something new. We've gone as far as we can. And maybe we've made some mistakes. And these mistakes are not serious. But, we kind of drifted off the path a little. Maybe something was exciting, but it seemed exciting. We drifted off the path, but how well did it work? It didn't work that well. So, we can now come back to the path without really bringing down too much blame on ourselves. It's okay. We're allowed to make the occasional mistake. Then the second line moves. The second line moves. It is a more decisive line, and it's talking about deciding perhaps that enough is enough. We really have gone as far as we should have done, and it's now time to go back. And then the fifth line moves, and the fifth line is more global in its scale. It's really looking at the situation we're in, what we've created, how far we've gone, the mistakes we've made, and we just see the whole picture. And we maybe had the option to return. We could have stopped. We decided maybe to carry on. We kind of knew that we'd made a mistake, but now there's a certain compulsion here. We have to return. We know that we've absolutely gone as far as we can. And in the process, sure, we've got to be completely honest about the mistakes we've made. We could certainly need to be honest about ourselves, honest to ourselves. And so we're honest about that. And again, it's not a problem. So the overall picture we get with this hexagram is of just deciding that something has gone too far. And also perhaps being aware that we weren't up to the job. It's not our fault. It's always, good to experiment, to try something new, to explore, provided we're not taking any risks. And here the implications are that no great harm has been done, but we have to return, and that is the right approach, and that is supported by the hexagram it moves to. And the hexagram it moves to is hexagram number 29, which is the abysmal. The abysmal represents perhaps what might happen if we were to just carry on regardless. The abysmal represents the abyss. You can see those two trigrams. They're both watery trigrams, but this is not watery as in a tranquil lake. This is watery as in the abyss. And so we don't want to fall in the abyss. And we're aware of the abyss. And so that's part of our impulse to return. We understand the dangers. We do know. We're not walking in ignorance. And so because we understand the dangers, we can act appropriately. And with the abysmal, the advice with the abysmal, maybe this is the path of return. And we follow gravity. We follow where the water flows. Water always takes the path of least resistance. And we do that. We know where the pitfalls are, but we can get round them. And in the end, by the end of the day, perhaps things can return to normality, and perhaps we've learnt from the experience. And finally, there is the conjunction between Venus and Mars. So this conjunction is something that has kind of dominated this video. And so looking at it, we have, there it is, there's Venus conjunct Mars. There is a precise moment the conjunction happens at 2:43 a.m. Sorry, did I say 2:43 a.m.? I have Is that 2:43 a.m.? It's not 2:43 a.m. It is. I've made a mistake there. I have. I've got to fix that. And that means that is the conjunction between Venus and Mars. Sorry. It might not seem very apparent. The problem I have with this program is this program has at the moment is insisting on inserting daylight saving time, and I forgot to knock off daylight saving time. So that's why there's a problem, and but yeah, it is 2:43 a.m. London time. That's when the aspect is. So you can see that this Venus Mars conjunction is at 18 degrees 9 Capricorn, and it's right trine the moon. I mean, the moon is at 18 degrees 38 Virgo. So somehow that moon trine is making this Venus-Mars conjunction even more obvious, even more apparent. So, what is the Venus-Mars conjunction about? Well, I've talked about Venus-Mars a lot. I mean, Venus-Mars is about attraction. It's about how people get on with each other, whether they don't get on with each other, what efforts they make to be attractive and to charm. That's certainly a way of looking at it, and it's not necessarily a fortunate aspect. It depends which way you look at it. You could say that Venus is overwhelmed by Mars, and this reminds us that attraction is not an absolute. Some people are attracted. Some people are attractive in some people's eyes, but ugly in another person's eyes. So you can't say that there is a fixed standard of attractiveness. It's not just about what people look like, it's what the world looks like. It is about beauty and ugliness. So that is a way of looking at Venus-Mars. And it is about charisma, and it's about people wanting attention, and perhaps trying to tie other people up in knots. That's Mars wanting to be in control, and maybe trying to suck the life force out of Venus. So there is a potential issue here with Venus-Mars. It's not always a fortunate aspect, and it can be quite violent. I mean, Venus conjunct Mars. Mars is a violent planet, can be a violent planet. So you put Venus next to Mars, and you might have all sorts of problems. And you could say that with Venus conjunct Mars, if you regard Venus as a female planet, Mars as a male planet, then Venus might be pressurized by Mars, and so from a feminine perspective, Venus-Mars may not always be fortunate. So it's an aspect that does have to be treated with a degree of caution. And remember, this Venus-Mars conjunction is making an opposition to Jupiter, so it's intensified by Jupiter. It's also intensified by the fact that it's close to the Sun, and so it's very much there, this Venus-Mars conjunction. Of course, Venus-Mars, over the next couple of days, you're going to get the Venus-Mars conjunction. The Venus-Mars midpoint is going to be opposition Jupiter. So with Jupiter on the Venus-Mars midpoint, that is really is about attempts to win people's hearts and minds, whether it's at a personal level or at the level of governments, societies, politics, propaganda. So it isn't necessarily easy, but it's seductive. By definition, the Venus-Mars conjunction is seductive. And, some people think it's amazing to have Venus-Mars aspects. But I don't think that's I don't think that is necessarily the case. Now, looking at the Venus-Mars conjunction on the dial, just give us an idea about what it looks like on the 90-degree dial. So there's our Venus-Mars. There's our Venus-Mars conjunction. You can see it because I'm just looking at to see what midpoints it's on. So there's Venus and Mars. I mean, it's not on any midpoints that are unsurprising. So when you look at the midpoints, it's just telling us what we already know. It's on the Sun-Jupiter midpoint. I mean, that's the point. It's connected with Sun and Jupiter. And the Sun and Jupiter means that this Venus-Mars is very much out there. It is all about a battle for hearts and minds. And I don't think there's really anything else that needs to be said about this specific. Well, sorry, there's always more to be said about Venus-Mars, and on a personal level, I think it is about how we get on with people, whether we like them, whether we don't like them, and also what we do to try to get attention. Now, to get a further idea about how Venus-Mars might work, I thought I'd look at a couple of examples. And in terms of events, I haven't really got a lot of events and people that I want to look at. I mean, for example, we had the assassination of John F. Kennedy. This happened at the time of a Venus-Mars conjunction. So Venus was at 21 Sagittarius and Mars was at 20 Sagittarius. So they were within 1 degree apart. And so, do you associate a Venus-Mars conjunction with an assassination? Well, it just might be that Venus, whatever that principle of Venus is damaged by Mars, and it just could be seen as just a violent aspect. I mean, one can try to get into the symbolism. We could say, I don't know, Mars would be Lee Harvey Oswald, and maybe Venus was Jackie Kennedy or whatever. But you might just want to see Venus-Mars conjunction as just a violent event. And it's kind of interesting that we've got Venus-Mars conjunction, as this Venus-Mars conjunction is becoming exact. I'm sure this is just coincidence. I'm not reading too much into it. But as the Venus-Mars conjunction is going on, it's happening, Trump is going on and on and on about Greenland, and listening to people seem to really seriously think that America might somehow invade Greenland. Before it was just a fantasy. Now people really say, oh yeah, they might move into Greenland. I mean, I think that's pretty straightforward if they want to do that. I mean, if they've already got bases in Greenland, it would just be a straightforward thing to just send some more troops into their bases and spread all over Greenland. I think there are 57,000 people in Greenland, so it's not going to be very difficult. And so that obviously impacts Denmark. So you could say that with all this talk with Venus-Mars conjunction, you're hearing about, I mean, Danish, I don't know what the quite relationship between Denmark and Greenland is. I mean, Greenland has a considerable amount of autonomy, but at some level, it is Danish territory. I don't know the precise relationship between Denmark and Greenland. And so there was a previous occasion when Venus was conjunct Mars, which affected Denmark, and that was the Danish capitulation. So when Germany invaded Denmark in April 1940. Denmark obviously capitulated straight away. I mean, it didn't really have much choice, did they? I mean, you compared Denmark with Germany, but at the time of the capitulation, Venus and Mars were really, really close. There was a Venus-Mars conjunction at around 5 degrees Gemini, and so that 14 minutes apart. So it might well be that Denmark is resonating to the Venus-Mars conjunction, and I'm not convinced that Greenland is really going to be invaded right now, or America's suddenly going to send in the troops. But it's kind of interesting that there's a lot of talk about Greenland and Danish territory being invaded at the time of a Venus-Mars conjunction. Given that, given what happened on April the 9th, 1940, and then there are some people who have got Venus-Mars conjunctions, and I try to look at people who have close Venus-Mars conjunctions, but there's one person who was obviously a recent American president, and that was Bill Clinton. So Bill Clinton was obviously known for his charm and his charisma, and as well as his sexual exploits, and he has a Venus-Mars conjunction. It's not a close Venus-Mars conjunction. I kind of wanted to look at closer Venus-Mars conjunctions, but he has a Venus-Mars conjunction in Libra. They're within 5 degrees. That's an acceptable orb for for Venus and Mars, and it's in the first house because Bill Clinton has Libra rising, and it's tied up with Neptune. So he's kind of got Venus and Mars either side of Neptune, and surely that Venus-Mars says so much about Bill Clinton, that Bill Clinton was he had charm, whatever you think of him, and I know that a lot of people were completely mesmerized by him, and it was perhaps that charm that helped him become president, indeed to become a 2-term president. And clearly he knew how to behave. Well, in one sense he didn't know how to behave, but he certainly had charisma when, for example, dealing with world leaders and dealing with the American populace. I mean, the American population, didn't matter what he did. When he stood again in 1996, he was re-elected. Although I think somehow he was helped by the explosion at in the bombing of the Oklahoma Center. I remember listening to Clinton talk just after the Oklahoma bombing. That was when Timothy McVeigh put this sort of truck bomb in his building in Oklahoma. I think he was trying to attack the government, but in reality, I think he destroyed. What did he destroy? Sort of some daycare center or whatever. It was, a lot of people were killed. But I was listening to Clinton speak when that explosion happened, and just his charm and his understanding of the situation and his ability to portray emotion. And I remember thinking at the time, I think, that's the turn. He was quite unpopular before it happened. At least that was my perception. I wasn't in America. I was just listening to it from London. But he was able to really turn things. And so he won the 1996 election. But he whatever you think of him, he definitely had the charm and charisma that such perhaps rare items in current politics. I mean, Trump does not have a Venus-Mars conjunction. He simply does not have, certainly not a Venus-Mars conjunction in Libra in the first house. He just doesn't have the charisma of Bill Clinton. And so other people with Venus-Mars conjunction. So when Bill Clinton was kind of associated with the whole Epstein thing, wasn't there a picture of Bill Clinton in a bath, in a tub, with a young woman who I think her face had been got a big black square on it, so it had been sort of partially redacted. And when we think about Epstein and other people involved with Epstein, one thinks of Prince Andrew, Venus-Mars conjunction, a close Venus-Mars conjunction in Capricorn, and Prince Andrew, by all accounts, his undoing was his obsession with sex. I mean, his obsession of wanting to have lots of women, and that's how he got involved with Epstein, and that really is a big part of his undoing. And I think that Prince Andrew has always said, he was always obsessed by sex, and that can be how Venus-Mars works. And for Clinton and Andrew, who was the problem? I mean, the problem was Epstein, and Epstein again, the obsession with sex, the whole way he expressed himself, the way he did up his houses, and it was perhaps all rather gross, but that's how he did it. And Jeffrey Epstein has had a exact conjunction between Venus and Mars in Pisces in his horoscope. So, in the case of Andrew Epstein and Andrew Epstein and Bill Clinton, we can certainly see one side of a Venus-Mars conjunction. And maybe this is particularly working in male charts, or some male charts, but it emphasizes the point that there is a strong sexual side to this conjunction between Venus and Mars. Other people who've got Venus-Mars conjunctions, the chair of the Federal Reserve, Jerome Powell. We only see Jerome Powell in terms of him as a sort of a banker and an economist. Now, his Venus-Mars conjunction is clearly not as powerful as those of Epstein, Clinton, and Prince Andrew. It's a dissociate conjunction. It's in different signs. So Mars is in Pisces, Venus is in Aries. So it's not super close. And so I don't know how that works. He must, I assume, have a certain charisma. Some people like him, some people don't like him. But I don't really know a great deal about him. He always strikes me as being a somewhat sort of petulant and rather weak chair of the Federal Reserve, which is why he's sort of digging in and not wanting to go, not wanting to lower interest rates. And then there is someone I know even less about is Kanye West. So Kanye West, so he is what? He's the former husband, is that right, of Kim Kardashian. He has a Venus-Mars conjunction at the beginning of Taurus. So that's quite an important conjunction. I mean, it's close. It's very close. Now, you might say if you've got Venus-Mars conjunction like that, you just have charisma. If you want to be a musician, a super famous musician, maybe it helps to be Venus-Mars, to have that Venus-Mars conjunction. But with that Venus-Mars conjunction, people very often either love you or they hate you. So a lot of people probably hate Kanye West, can't stand him, can't stand his music. But then, on the other hand, there are a substantial group of people but certainly thought he was great. I don't know whether they think he's great anymore, but maybe he does illustrate the advantage of having it, and it's also tied up with Chiron. Maybe that means something to you, but I don't really know much about Kanye West. Now, Venus-Mars, we looked at men with Venus-Mars conjunctions. Now, one woman who has a Venus-Mars conjunction is Kaya Kallas. Kaya Kallas is the what is she? I forget her title. Is she Vice President of the European Commission? She's the effective European Foreign Minister in charge of European foreign policy. Is it really such a good idea to have someone with a Venus-Mars conjunction with such a role? I mean, if you're a foreign minister, you're trying to get on with people. Okay, she might be very good at getting on with her people in the European Union, but she's certainly antagonized the Chinese. She's made sort of remarks about the Second World War, totally underestimating the role of China or Russia, and she takes generally a very belligerent, hostile approach to Russia. And that might say something about her Venus-Mars conjunction, and she's trying to get other countries in the European Union in line with her Venus-Mars conjunction. So perhaps what we have with Kaya Kallas is we have a woman who has Venus in Taurus. That's very much her, Venus in Taurus. Venus is not going to be a projected planet, but you put Mars next to it. and it creates an aggressive line to it. It gives her aggression, and so she's often regarded as, by people who are not total Euro fanatics, as actually being a bit of a disaster. She's not really being she's not a successful foreign minister, or whatever the title is of the foreign policy, the foreign affairs supremo in the European Union. She's not doing a good job, because she's antagonizing people, and kind of that's not surprising with that Venus-Mars conjunction. By the way, I don't have the time of birth, so I'm not saying it's in the second house, but I think you can see the problems in her chart. Anyway, that's it with Venus-Mars. Thank you very much for watching this video. If you enjoyed this video, I would be very grateful if you were to like it. If you're not subscribed, super grateful if you were to subscribe. If you want to buy me a coffee, there's a link in the description, and I will talk to you again tomorrow.